Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like for you to turn with me to the book of Exodus, chapter 20. Chapter 20. Look forward to our next time together. When you're entering into a worship service like this and you have participated in the activities of our worship this morning, you look forward to the next opportunity you can do such. And pray that that will be this evening at 5 o'clock. Many of you that are real good texters and good at the lingo of social media, and I might even add the idea of emailing. There's a tendency to abbreviate. And the abbreviations go something like this. LOL, laughing out loud. BTW, by the way. CYA, see you later. Now that doesn't sound right, but that's the way the lingo goes. IDK, I don't know. LMK, let me know. And the list goes on and on. Many people have done that. And I would say, since I'm seeing some smiling faces, you've done it too. That smile on your face just means you're guilty. Well, there is a tendency sometimes for people to go beyond just what might be reasonable. They go beyond to the point that they show great irreverence to God in some of their abbreviations. And without me going into the details of all that, you know some of what those are. But here's the most interesting thing about that. Those people that have participated in that, they are some of the people that will quote the Lord's Prayer in the book of Matthew chapter 6, where it begins to say, "Our Father who art in heaven." That's what's really ironic to me and very contradictory. To use the initials for irreverence to God, but then they will say these words. The introductory to that prayer in the book of Matthew chapter 6 is just giving you an understanding, a declaration of where God is. It is helping you see the nature of our God. It also gives God a name, the Father. Just to say the word God has its real, preeminent, exalted esteem and grandeur and glory and honor. And it is so interesting to me that there are so many places in life that we are given the opportunity to show reverence to God. And it's not just in a worship service. It can be in daily life, at home, could be at work, could be even in a store somewhere. But there's so many different opportunities, occasions, circumstances, places where this idea of reverence can be held true. As we talked about last week, the idea of reverence is one of these things that can be simply defined as saying holding God in the highest and holiest esteem. And there's probably a lot of other ways in which people define reverence. This may be in its simple form. One of the occasions of where reverence for God was demonstrated was the book of Exodus chapter 20. In Exodus chapter 20, this is where the people of Israel have arrived at the foot of the mountain, Mount Sinai. And they're about ready to receive the law. And interestingly enough, in chapter 19, they say, all that Jehovah, this is verse 8 of 19, all that Jehovah has spoken we will do. And Moses reported the words of the people unto Jehovah. And with that being said, it's just like they're ready for this. They are ready for whatever God assigns. And they're ready to uphold whatever God says to them in great reverence and honor, that they will do everything they can to revere God and His Word in all that they do. In other words, every external thing that you do has come from an internal understanding of who God is. And it's not just in a prayer, Our Father art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. It is in the name of God itself. Here is an instance, though, and I'm not going to read every one of these verses in verse 1 to verse 21, but I want you to catch very clearly the things that are stated in these commands in verse 3. Thou shalt have no other God before me. Verse 4, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or anything in likeness to it that is of heaven above, or that is in the earth or beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Verse 7, thou shalt not take the name of Jehovah thy God in vain, for Jehovah will not hold him guiltless that takes his name in vain. And then verse 8, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Then after all the commandments were given, there's something that you must understand. They're asking of Moses, speak with us in verse 19, and we will hear, but let not God speak with us lest we die. Now, that just indicates to me that they are holding God so supremely that they know how serious the reverence should be to God, because in the last three verses of the verse, in verse 19, lest we die, they take what is given to God very seriously. Now, Moses says, in the very next verse, in verse 20, do not fear, for God has come to prove you that this his fear may be before you, that you sin not. The fear is the same idea of the reverence that which they can demonstrate to God in all that they do. Don't be afraid. Come to God and reverence him to prove you. And fear may come before you. That's what God is looking for. That's what he's desiring. This is what he deserves. Reverencing God. They may think we need to stay away. They may think we don't need to come near. They may think we don't need to really know God. So Moses, you tell us. But Moses says, don't fear, but fear him. Reverence him. Reverence him. And there's more that goes into this. If you notice in verse 22 to verse 24, God gets into some specifics about this. He says to Moses, thus shalt thou say to the children of Israel, I have taught with you from heaven, you shall not make other gods with me. Gods of silver, gods of gold, you shall not make these unto you. An altar of earth shalt thou make unto me, and shalt sacrifice upon it burnt offerings, peace offerings, thy sheep and thine oxen, in every place where I record my name. I will come to thee, and I will bless thee. And thou shalt make me an altar of stone. Thou shalt not build it of hewed stones, for thou shalt lift up thy tool upon it, and thou shalt, unless thou pollute it, neither shalt thou go up by steps unto my altar, that thy nakedness be not uncovered thereon. You will not make, in verse 23, other gods with me. Gods of silver, gods of gold, you shall not make these things unto you. And you could pretty well tell from verse 23, this is what's forbidden. And he already stated it earlier. It's very similar to words of what Jesus said in the book of Matthew chapter 4, verse 10. God is the only one you will worship and you will serve. And the implication of that just helps you and I understand there is something and there is someone of which reverence is forbidden. It is not to be regarded, not to be exalted, not to be revered, not to give an honor other than to God. And I can only think of two things. One is man. If you look at the scripture in the book of Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 through 28, God placed within all of us his image. Every one of us. And even in the book of Psalm chapter 8 and verse 4, it says, what is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man that thou visitest him? No matter the dominion of which God gave to us, we are not to be the ones to receive the glory. We are not the ones to receive the reverence. No matter how much God gave to us as dominion, we are not the ones. Though you will see the very first temptation, the book of Genesis chapter 3, verse 5, notice this. The statement that is made to Eve about the temptation. If you partake of this, Satan says to her, you will be like God. You will be like God. He has taken this dominion that God has given man, made in his image, and turns it into an opportunity to say, you can have the dominion, you can have the reverence, you can be exalted. It's all about you. It's all about what you want is most important. There's a statement that is made in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 35, says, the Lord himself is God, there is none other besides him. And this was pretty well illustrated in the book of Acts chapter 14, when Barnabas, as well as Paul, were on their journey in the city of Lystra. And in the city of Lystra, there's this cripple that is there, and they're healing him, that is, Paul does, fastens his eyes upon him in verse 9, seeing that he had faith to behold, he said, well, loud voice, stand upright on your feet, and he leaped up and walked. Now, when the multitudes, this is their response to this, when the multitude saw what Paul had done, they lifted up their voice and said in the speech of the Lycaonian, the gods are come down to us in the likeness of men. In the likeness of men. And then they called Barnabas Jupiter and Paul Mercury because he was the chief speaker. And then they brought him all these animals, all these things to each one of these men, Paul and Barnabas. Now you could go away, Paul and Barnabas could go away and say, well, I didn't know people thought that much of us. But notice a little bit later here, Paul and Barnabas heard about it, and they rent their garments. This is how they perceived the mindset of man, revering man. They rent their garments, sprang forth from among the multitudes, crying out and saying, sirs, why do you do these things? We also are men like passions with you, and you bring good tidings that you should turn from these vain things unto the living God, who made heaven and earth and the sea and all that is in them and therein. Don't revere us. Don't exalt us. Don't give us the glory. Don't give us the honor. Give all of the glory and the honor unto God. Well, why shouldn't we? Well, if we took the honor, if we took the glory, and we took the reverence, here is what we would do. Very similar to what the warning is in the book of 2 Thessalonians about the man of sin coming into the world, where it says in verse 4, he will oppose and exalt himself against all that is called God, or that is worship, so that he sits in the temple of God and sets himself forth as God. If you start exalting a man, if you start putting man in the position of reverence, if you start putting him in the position that all the glory comes to him because of what he's done, then he will think that that's who he is. She will think that's who they are. Well, are we not the people who are fearfully and wonderfully made? Absolutely. According to the book of Psalm 139, we are, verse 14, 15, fearfully and wonderfully made. Whenever Allison and Eduardo bring that little boy into this building, I don't know how many of you are going to ooh and ah and make all over that child, just like you would any other newborn child into this world, and says, isn't he or she beautiful? And you'll talk about their hair, talk about the skin, you'll talk about every feature that that baby has as someone who is fearfully and wonderfully made. But in the Hebrew, the idea of the fearfully and wonderfully made is not to say, okay, now that child takes upon itself the idea of exalted above any other baby or any other person. It is now at the point to where Allison and Eduardo, and they're probably listening to what I'm saying, Allison and Eduardo are going to be the individuals who are going to train the child to know the fear of the Lord, the dreadful fear of God, and reverencing the one that made the child, not the child itself. For the idea of wonderfully made is something to be said for realizing that this is not just a gorgeous, beautiful baby. This is an individual who is made in distinction from and to the relationship that they have with God. They couldn't be wonderfully made if it was not for God. It is not to exalt the child, and the child is not supposed to take all the exaltation. But that's what you see happening in the book of Romans chapter 1. If you tend to forget God, if you remove and forsake God from your mind and you fail to reverence Him, then number one, you will not give thanks, and you will turn the creature into the creator. As if everything's about them, the dominion, the glory, the honor, the exaltation, the reverence. But who in chapter 9 of Romans verse 20 can look to the maker, the potter, and say, I know I'm the best. I know I'm your vessel. I know I'm the greatest. According to 1 Corinthians chapter 3, in verse 21, there is a statement that he makes in that passage by declaring, let no one glory in men. Let no one glory in man. The reverence that people give to man is one of the reasons why the Jews in the book of John chapter 10, in verse 32 to verse 34, came along and said, we got to stone this man. And referring to Jesus. In the book of John chapter 10, they're hearing Jesus talk about he and God are one. Matter of fact, in verse 30, he even says, I and the Father are one. So the Jews took up stones to stone him. You're not supposed to do this. This is not supposed to be you exalting yourself above God. God's the only one to be reverenced. And Jesus says, many good works have I shown you from the Father, which of these works do you stone me? The Jews answered, for a good work we stone thee not, but you're blaspheming because you're calling yourself and making yourself God. And then Jesus comes along and talks to them about a passage in the book of Psalm chapter 82. Is it not written in your law, I said you are gods? Now a humanist could take that passage and say, see, we're the God of our own life. We can do whatever we want to. There's no severe consequences to that. It's up to us. We've got dominion. We've got control. We've got power. But the book of Psalm chapter 82 and verse 6 is about the unjust judges who are before God's people and who should be acting justly and honorably. And they're not fully understanding in this all of the works that Jesus is doing in the name of God. If you were to go back a couple of chapters earlier in the book of John chapter 8 verse 44, what's Jesus doing on the earth anyway? He is trying to bring people and draw them to God. It's not all about him. He's trying to bring glory to God in all that he's doing and all that he's saying. If we start letting our life be exalted above God and to be God, then maybe we'll appear to be the one that's got the most power and deserves the most glory. There was a time when Moses appeared to Aaron and before Pharaoh in the book of Exodus chapter 4, as well as Exodus chapter 7, like God. Now, was Moses taking the place of God? Was Moses now exalting himself since he was able to be now the deliverer and the one who would bring about the release of all of Israel from captivity? Or are the things of which he is doing a matter of reverence, acting upon God's will? Well, think about you and I in the book of 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 16, 17. Those of us that are Christians, who are we? According to the text, we are spending the past of our time in sojourning in reverence or in fear. Be holy even as I am also holy. And in our life, according to what Paul talked about in Philippians chapter 1 and verse 20, we're to be magnifying God in our body. It's not that we're trying to get the reverence. We're trying to do all that we can to revere God within what we have the capability of doing that he's given us by his grace. And we're the ones that might just appear to be God to others. Not that we are God, but that we will appear because of what we're doing. One of the places in the book of Romans chapter 13 that I want you to look at with me is prior to there being any honor given to a man or a group of individuals is in verse 1 of the book of Romans chapter 13. Let every soul be in subjection to the higher powers. And what is the basis of that? What's the meaning for that? Why should we do that? For there is no power but of God, and the powers that be are ordained of God. We might show more reverence and fear to a policeman or the FBI than we would to God. But no policeman, nobody that works for the FBI has the power unless that power were to be ordained of God. Therefore, he that resists the power withstands the ordinance of God. The reverence and the dominion and the glory and the exaltations to be given God before you ever give ever honor to the authorities. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we've just hit on something as to the reason there is such a disrespect for authority in any place, especially in the authorities that you see here in chapter 13, verse 1. We'd rather beat them up. We'd rather shoot them. We'd rather criticize them. We'd rather get in their face and mock them rather than showing the honor that they deserve because they're acting upon the power of God. See, that just helps you understand when man is the reverenced, exalted, and praised individual, then they can do to anybody else whatever they want to. They can befriend them if they want to, or they can hate them and shoot them. Kill them, beat them, abuse them, whatever it may be. So many relationships in life have been abused verbally, physically, and there have been people turned in all over the place because they are the ones that are to be revered and honored more than anything in the world. Probably not a relationship other than marriage, you see that most often, where that idea of head is taken to the point of thinking that you could just do about anything you want to that woman. Please value this. You were not given that dominion. You were given that leadership by the ordination of God, but to lead the woman in the path of righteousness, not to say you do whatever I want you to do. If you ever get to the point of revering a person or a group of people, then there's a great chance you will find yourself doing exactly what you see in the book of John chapter 10. John chapter 12. in verse 42 and 43, where the Jews, the Pharisees, would not confess in the name of Jesus because they loved the praise of men more than they loved the praise of God. And here, right here, is probably where we might want to make sure that the impact of this means the most. If it does get to the point that man is revered greater, then man, I'm talking about mankind, man and woman, will be the ones who control so much about what you do. They're in the control, they're in the driver's seat, they're the ones in the position of doing everything they can in whatever relationship that you're in. And the more they are in control, the more you give them the honor and the more fear you give them. And you don't move until they say move. Rather than letting God be the controlling part of your life. Are friends really that honest with you? Are they really that reliable? Do they really hold to their promises? Ask those same questions when it comes down to God. God's holy love, God's abundant grace, God's supreme will, God in all that He provides, and God that all that He promises is greater and to be reverenced than anything that man could ever offer. I wonder sometimes whether or not there are people that are afraid of the elders coming to see them, to talk to them about them coming to worship service, or talk to them about improving their spiritual life, more than they are in fear of the God who gave them first that opportunity to be a child of God. If their reverence to God is and should be where it is, then there won't be any fear of the elder or the teacher or the other brother trying to help them. There will only be fear and reverence of God, exalting Him and to be in His presence always. Enough said about that. Let's talk about the second thing, which is things. In the book of Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 to verse 24, outlines pretty clearly the idea of being single, devoted, committed, and without any qualms about God being the absolute one to hold dear. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon the earth, where moth and rust consume and where thieves break through and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth consume, and where thieves do not break through or steal. For where thy treasure is, there will thy heart be also. The lamp of the body is the eye, therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye is full of evil, the whole body shall be full of darkness. Therefore, the light that is in thee, let it be, therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is the darkness? If you've got things that you revere, there's probably one of three things that you do. Number one, you lay them up somewhere, because you know that you're going to probably need it at some other point in time. You got to have it ready at any given moment. The second thing probably happens is you want to secure them. You're going to protect them in every possible way. I mean, you've got to have a guard over it, in front of it, around it, whatever it may be, protection, security system, whatever it may be. But the third thing is, the potential is, if you revere the things, you want to show it. You'd rather let somebody come in and see it. If it's in a room that's designated, that's probably lint-free, dust-free, or it's probably covered up with something and you uncovered somebody, you want to make sure that you are able to see the expression on their face of great surprise and great wonder. That you even have one, and it's in this such good shape. That's probably one of three things, maybe more than that. But yet, when you think about it from the biblical standpoint, you look at 1 John chapter 2 and verse 15, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. For any man that loveth the world, the love of the Father is not in him. trying to make sure that we reverence the thing is really going to hold on to us and grab us to the point that it's controlling everything that we do. And we hold it dear. And if we ever go without it, we feel lost. There's a young lady, Diane and I know this story very well, young girl, teenager, who came to camp one summer. This has been several years ago. Had the policy then to take away all the cell phones from all the children. Shame, shame, shame. Well, we did it for several reasons. But before the day was over, this is on Friday, after all that everybody's about to leave, there was this young lady that came up, was looking for her phone. And we said, well, we'll get them a little bit later. Well, she came back up again. And we went and got the phone. And we let her take it out of the Ziploc bag. And she grabbed a hold of it. And she did it just like this. Oh, I feel so good now. I feel so much better now. It's like the joy of life had just been found. Whatever she had been separated from was now her greatest joy. And she went off with great joy, pranced down the road with such great joy because of what she had held. Reverence for things. It controls you. It takes you into areas of which you never thought it would. It dominates. Things have a tendency, because it is glitter, because of what it possesses, what it gives, what you think it promises, you think you're going to get it over and over again. And you see, the most interesting thing about this is there's a common practice. It's a very difficult thing in verse 24 that seems to be the tendency among most. No man can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold the one to despise the other. And he goes on and talks about all these things of which these people need to understand about worry. Worry is a result of revering something, a thing, a person. And the questions, there are three questions that are asked in verse 25. What you will eat, what you'll drink, or what you'll put on your body. All those things help you understand. This is a worry of which you're trying to make sure you control it. It's got dominion over you some way. And he says an interesting thing, and I'm not going to go through all this, but there's an interesting statement he says in verse 32. For after all these things do the Gentiles seek. The implication is all the Gentiles out in the world have this preeminent idea of holding on to things of the world. But then he goes on to verse 33 and says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. It's very clear what is to be given the most preeminence. But it implies that the Gentiles do this, and people that are disciples don't need to be doing this. This is a forbidden reverence. And I want you to listen to this. Two passages. Psalm chapter 63 that help us understand clearly this thirst. And I want you to key in on what he thirsts. O God, thou art my God. Earnestly will I seek thee. My soul thirsts for thee. My flesh longs for thee. In a dry and weary land, where no water is. So have I looked upon thee, the sanctuary, to see thy power and thy glory, because thy loving kindness is better than life. My lips shall praise thee, so will I bless thee while I live. I will lift up my hands in thy name. My soul shall be satisfied, as with marrow and fatness. And my mouth shall praise thee with joyful lips. When I remember thee upon my bed, and meditate on thee in the night watches, for thou hast been my help. In the shadow of thy wings will I rejoice. My soul follows hard after thee. Thy right hand upholds me. To get a very true, good perspective about things and what our attitude and thought should be, listen to this. In verse 6 of the book of 1 Timothy chapter 6, but godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into this world, neither can we carry anything out. But having food and covering, let's be there with content. But they that are minded to be rich fall into a temptation and a snare and many foolish and hurtful lusts, such as drown men in perdition and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, which some reaching after have been led astray from the faith and have pierced themselves through the many sorrows. Verse 17. Charge them that are rich in this present world that they be not high-minded, nor have their hope set up on the uncertainty of riches, but on God. Why? He gives richly to us all things to enjoy. And that they do good, that they be rich in good works, that they be ready to distribute, willing to communicate, laying up in store for themselves a good foundation against the time to come, that they may lay hold on the life which is life indeed. Not a better way to describe clearly where things are in relationship to God. Not to be revered, not to be honored, not to be glorified. No thing, no man takes the place of reverence to God. The reverence to God is learning His will, being submissive in heart, and follow through with all the actions of obedience, without apology, without hesitation. If there's a necessity on your part to have let man and things get in the way of the gospel and the power of transforming your life in the gospel, then please make sure you do those changes, make those changes appropriately, quickly, immediately, so that you can have the freedom to express Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and to be baptized in the water to have all sins washed away. A newness of life, of where God is exalted in every relationship of which we have in life. God is not just the beginning of a prayer. God is exalted, reverent, Holy One that needs you to be holy as He is holy. And the only possible way that can happen is through your honoring His will and being obedient to it. Do what's right while together we sing.